Hey guys, I'm going to bring you the comparison between the Nexus 4 and the iPhone 4S. This is more of a comparison for people who are still using the iPhone 4S or a comparable phone and want to upgrade to the Nexus 4. The Nexus 4 has a quad-core S4 Pro processor, whereas the 4S is running a dual-core A5 processor, which is a very capable processor as well. The Nexus 4 is actually slightly thinner than the 4S, but not by much. Here you can see in this video that the 4S is slightly thicker, but it's barely noticeable. Only when you put them side by side will you even notice it. Obviously the Nexus 4 has a much bigger display at 4.7 inches, whereas the 4S has a 3.5 inch display. Both are IPS, both are super high PPI. The Nexus 4 is 320 and the 4S is 326. Let's go ahead and boot both of these devices on to see which one boots faster. The displays should be pretty comparable. Obviously the Nexus 4 should generally be a lot faster of a phone. I mean, it has 2 gigs of RAM, whereas the iPhone 4S only has 512 megs, and it's just generally a lot more spec'd up. So there you saw that the 4S loaded a lot quicker. Now let's go ahead and do the browser test. The first website I'm going to go on is theverge.com. I've been using them for all my tests and it's one of the best sites out there. Let's see which one loads faster. So I'll try to time these to the best of my abilities. So they're both going, and as you saw, the Nexus 4 beat out the 4S, but not by that much. And let's go ahead and open some links up. Here you saw where the huge performance difference exists. The Nexus 4 destroyed the 4S. Now, so that's what it's like for the mobile site. Let's go to the full site. Obviously you can see that the Nexus 4 is loading quicker. It just got rid of the previous page quicker, and there you go, it's loading up and it's almost done. The 4S is having a sort of hard time, but there you go, they almost finished at the same time, which is really impressive for the 4S. I mean, for a year-old phone, it's keeping up really well. And even here you'll notice that they finish basically at the exact same time. The Nexus 4 starts loading quicker, but they end up finishing at the same time. If we look at the bars, pinch to zoom is still smoother on the iPhone 4S compared to the Nexus 4, but it's nothing that different. Now let's open some apps up. Let's test Angry Birds first. So it loaded much quicker on the Nexus 4, and then for this Game Center, for some reason it's lagging out and won't let me cancel it. But anyways, you saw that the Nexus 4 still beat out the 4S. Now let's open up Flipboard. Surprisingly, it came up first on the Nexus 4, even though the logo popped up first on the 4S. Let's see which one builds our Flipboards quicker. The 4S actually did it quicker. I mean, it's doing a good job keeping up. The Nexus 4 actually has some touch issues sometimes. It doesn't even respond to my fingers sometimes. But here you see some lag on the 4S compared to the Nexus 4, which isn't too bad, but it still exists. And on a day-to-day usage, you will definitely, a couple of milliseconds will definitely become more noticeable over time. Let's try and open up a couple more links here. So it popped up quicker on the 4S. I'm going to do some Siri and navigation comparison. I actually forgot to put my camera sound on, but you can just watch for the cues on the screen to see which one's faster. As you see here, Siri is actually loading up the maps and stuff quicker, and they pretty much finish at basically the same time. It's nothing too crazy. I mean, Siri, the iPhone is running iOS 6. Whatever the latest one is, so it's up to date and it has Apple Maps and everything. Now let's try and do a couple more things. Just watch for the cues here because there's no sound. So for this navigation thing, the Nexus 4 popped up the information quicker, but the iPhone 4S is almost ready to go, and it actually got beat by the Nexus 4 this time. Shouldn't be a surprise. Nexus 4 is generally a faster phone, but the iPhone 4S is doing a pretty good job. I mean, for an older processor, it's keeping up. But like I said before, it's those slight performance increases might be worth upgrading for. Let's do a couple of other tests. And here you'll see that Google Now just brings up information quicker. Like Siri brings up what you need, but that Wolfram Alpha stuff, sometimes it's just too much depth that you really don't need. And if you're asking questions like when is a person's birthday or how many centimeters are there in an inch, you don't want extreme amount of detail. You just want quick stuff. So the Nexus 4 is beating out Siri here with Google Now. So here it gives you the score, whereas on Siri it's going to give you the roster. Now, it's not always necessary to get the roster, but some people like looking at stats and stuff, so that might be helpful. But Google Now gives you what you need most of the time a lot quicker. So it's beating out Siri in pretty much every single way now. So it actually, for this one, I think it might end up doing a Google search or bring up Wolfram. Yeah, brought up Wolfram Alpha, and it wasn't. It's just a lot of information, and especially when you're on the go, Google Now is generally a lot better. Like for example, if you're driving, you don't want to read all that stuff on Wolfram Alpha. You want Google Now or Siri or whoever to tell it to you, and it just that generally does a better job on Google Now. For some questions, obviously, like Siri does a better job. It's like I asked who was taller, LeBron or Kobe, and Siri told me it was LeBron, whereas Google Now didn't even bring anything up. Now, I'm going to try to show you shutter performance on both the 4S and the Nexus 4. Once again, the volume is down, so you're just going to have to watch for the flashes on the screen. Just watch for the cues. You'll notice that the 4S has much quicker shutter speeds. Like I'm taking pretty much double the pictures on the 4S as I am on the Nexus 4. Now let's see how they both compare in terms of camera performance. So on the left is the Nexus 4 pictures, and on the right are the 4S pictures. They're both doing a really good job, but in my opinion, the 4S edges out just by a little bit. The 4S has the same sensor as the iPhone 5. Here's a good example where the Nexus 4 gets destroyed. Here's an example where the Nexus 4 does better. In low light, it actually seems like they're pretty head-to-head. Some pictures the 4S does better, some pictures the Nexus 4 does better. Here the Nexus 4 arguably is doing worse. Here the 4S is doing a much better job. Here's a video comparison. The Nexus 4 actually does pretty good job with video in low light.
From my point of view, it looks like the iPhone is doing a better job in low light. See how it does in some brighter light. Both perform really well. You can judge for yourself to see exactly which one you prefer.
And up next you'll see the iPhone 4S.
On both phones to see which one does better.
It brings in more light, but it's also grainier at the same time when I'm trying to watch the two head to head. They're both really comparable, but generally overall they're both really comparable. So for camera performance, I might give the edge to the 4S just because of the previous shots that I showed you guys for the pictures. The 4S was just taking better pictures consistently. And here's the two side by side that you guys can take a look at, and you can see they're both good. Nexus 4 does a slight better job in some conditions, whereas the 4S does a better job in other conditions. Here, when I'm looking at the actual video, it actually looks like the Nexus 4 edges out just a little bit in low light, but once you get into better lighting, it becomes a lot more head-to-head sort of thing. So which phone do I recommend? Obviously, I recommend the Nexus 4. It's just spec'd up in every single way. It's the latest and greatest in terms of Android. If you're looking to upgrade and you're still on iOS, this is the best time to do it. Sell your 4S for 300, 350, get a Nexus 4.